This is a tip to give you a higher chance that you hire the right people. And examples of how we've used this specific tip on how to hire anyone from personal trainers to salespeople to videographers, things of that nature. And basically it all boils down to this. My favorite tip, and this is going to be applicable to most of you guys, is when it comes to hiring trainers, I want to first identify the qualities that I want that trainer to have. Number one, your personality. Number two, I want to know how coachable you are. I also need to know that you're humble enough to take coaching and take feedback and move on said feedback. And so it allows me to sort of select for a handful of those attributes before I actually make the mistake of hiring them. So the best way to know whether or not somebody's going to be able to do the job that you're trying to hire them for is to have them do the fucking job. What's happening, beautiful people? Hello and welcome to another episode of the Build Your Gympire Podcast. You're in the right place if you're a gym owner, box owner, personal trainer, fitness pro that is looking to grow their gym, grow their business in ways that you, your team, your community, the people you serve, your family, and not least importantly, your bank account are going to feel absolutely awesome about. Today, we're going to talk about hiring again. I gave you guys a tip a few episodes ago about a way to kind of give yourself a higher chance of not hiring the wrong people, if that makes sense. This is a tip to give you a higher chance that you hire the right people. You can probably stop the whole episode one sentence in, but I'm going to give you some additional tips and examples of how we've used this specific tip on how to hire anyone from personal trainers to salespeople to videographers, things of that nature. And basically it all boils down to this, right? The best way to make sure that the person that you're hiring can actually do the job is to have them do the job before you hire them. Now, what exactly does that look like in practice? Now, you're not necessarily, I'm not talking about an internship program thing, although those can be absolutely fantastic, right? Where you have people that are basically either working for free or for a small stipend in exchange for school credit or completing a school project, things like that. That's great. I love the idea of intern programs. I'm not the person to tell you about that. I'll probably have one of the twin left guards or the twin linebackers. Depends on how much weight they've lost, but I'll let them unpack that. They've both been, I think, pretty successful in having internship programs and things like that have been served as a great feeder system for them in their business. But let's say you're not hiring interns, which, by the way, I believe in the US, it is illegal to have a non-school attending adult work for free, right? They need to be compensated in some way. And in internships, the compensation a lot of times is like school credit of some kind. And so the old game, they used to say, oh yeah, hire apprenticeships and basically don't pay them for 3 months. I don't think you can legally do that. I'm not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice. I also don't think you're going to get the best people doing things that way. It's a much more competitive landscape than it was 10, 15 years ago. And so in this context, I'm not talking about having somebody do some sort of deeply extended trial. I'm talking about basically mixing in filters to the interview process to give you a better idea, while still being, again, a reasonable interview process, a better idea of how well that person is going to perform on the job. Now, my favorite tip, and this is going to be applicable to most of you guys, is when it comes to hiring trainers, I want to first identify the qualities that I want that trainer to have. And there's a bunch of different interview questions and things like that you can do to kind of put them through the ringer and get an idea of who they are as a person. But to me, the best thing is, and what this allows us to do is to essentially circumvent the need for experience. Because I don't frankly care how experienced you are when I'm hiring a trainer, right? Back in the day when I was doing that all the time, I don't necessarily care how experienced they are. I care more about, number one, your personality, right? Because if people don't enjoy training with you, they're not going to keep coming back. So number one is personality. And personality is a hell of a lot less coachable to me than it is to teach somebody how to coach a squat. Number two, I want to know how coachable you are, because if you're coming in with less experience or you don't necessarily know our methodology of training or whatever it is, I need to know that you're coachable. I also need to know that you're humble enough to take coaching and take feedback and move on said feedback without feeling like, getting all butthurt about getting a little bit of feedback and getting constructive criticism to try to get you better at your job. I don't want somebody who feels like they already know everything. And so it allows me to sort of self-select for a handful of those attributes before I actually make the mistake of hiring them. Because again, and we talked about this in the last episode where I talked about hiring stuff, dude, it is expensive to hire people. It is even more expensive to hire the wrong person, because now not only have you gone through this hiring process already, you've spent time, you probably spent money on ads, et cetera, you've also spent money on training the person and probably a lot of time in training the person. So if we can make sure that the person can do the job before we hire them, that sounds like a way better deal than figuring out, oh, they can't freaking do the job that we've hired them for a month, 3 months, 6 months in, and now you're trying to hire somebody new for it, repeating the whole process, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't have a good mechanism for hiring, you're probably going to hire a bunch of shit people, and that sounds like a really frustrating place to live, right? So how do we do this in the training space? Well, to me, the best idea that I have personally is to, number one, I'm going to give them a sample workout. So this is after, they've done a phone screen, maybe they've done a video talking about why they'd be a fit for the position. They probably come in for their first interview already. You've gotten a feel for them, gotten the history, et cetera, et cetera. The next step for me is going to be to have them come in and do basically a test session with me or my coaches. Maybe, I'd bring wifey in, so on and so forth. But I'm going to bring in a handful of people. Ideally, it can be just a one-on-one session for a one-on-one gym, or a one-on-one session if you don't have a way to get other people in the door to basically train alongside you while this prospective coach or prospective trainer does the sample, the little taster session, I guess, with you. And so what you do for this is you're going to give them a workout, right? You're going to give them a workout with movements that sort of fit what your philosophy is in your particular facility. I'm going to give them some coaching tips along with the movements. I'm going to give them a video that basically explains what we want to look for with the movements. I might purposely leave some stuff out, but I'm going to have some notes in there on how I want them to deliver the session, what the movements are, what the coaching cues are, the things that I want to see the prospective coach looking out for while they're coaching the session. And basically, it's going to be a short 15, 20-minute example, like a micro session that you might do in your facility. You're not going to have them do the whole thing. Don't make them do an hour, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to do a micro session. And the reason I want you to keep this to, say, 15, 20 minutes is that the next step, so once they come in and actually do the thing, you're going to end up giving them feedback. Now, one of the things I want to make sure you do while you're doing this test session, or if you're having other coaches or whatever do this test session for you because you don't want to do the training session that the prospective coach is taking them through, is to purposely fuck some stuff up. So if you mention, and again, I'm not like Mr. Physiology and training anymore, but let's say that they're going to do a bench press and you really want them to be looking out for getting here, right? When they're, I don't know if you can still hear me, but getting here when they're pressing. So if we might say something like, yeah, if you notice people going like this on their press, we want to make sure we fix it and get them here. What I'm going to do in the session is I'm going to make sure that I'm fucking some stuff up and I want to see if they're going to catch it. I want to make sure that I might pick a weight that's too heavy or act like it's too heavy or whatever. I know you guys are also super jacked, right? There's not a weight in the gym that's heavy enough for you. But I might say, if I'm giving a tip on weight selection and, it looks like people are doing this, I want them to bring the weight down for the client in this case, right? The fake client. Well, I want the coach to catch that. I want to see if they're going to catch that. And then what I'm going to do, and I base my level of asshole on the feedback, on the perceived humility of the person on the other side. So if I get the sense that I'm dealing with someone and their humility might be a little bit of a problem, I'm going to be harder on the feedback to see if they can take that coaching, right? If they can take that feedback and move on it and be humble enough to be like, oh yeah, that's actually a great point. Thanks so much. I'm going to work on this and improve it in the next one. The next thing that we're going to do after we give the feedback, right? So what have we done just to summarize things so far? We've given them a sample session with notes that I want them to pay attention to, because guess what? If they have zero experience, but they come in and they do their homework and they show up and it's like, wow, they've actually paid attention to the video. They're giving me the coaching cues that were in the video. They're looking for the things that I said I wanted to see in the video. I don't care if they have 10 years experience or if they've got 10 seconds of experience. If they can do that and it means enough to them, they're going to take the effort to really knock it out of the park with that sample session. I know I have someone who can learn our system and coach our system well, right? Then I'm going to mess up some things purposefully in the session, right? I want to see if they catch it. So that's during that initial 15-minute kind of micro session that you're having that prospective hire coach for you. Next step is I'm going to give them feedback, and I'm kind of basing my level of assholery based on how, humble or not so humble I think the person is. So if they seem super humble, then I'm going to give them some things because I want to see what happens next. So if they're more humble, I might give them a handful of things, a couple things to see if they can get better and kind of take some coaching. If they seem less humble, like they feel like they know everything already, then I'm going to be kind of a dick, see how they take the coaching, see how they take the feedback. And then in both cases, I want them to do either pieces of or the entire session essentially again, right? This is why you want to make it like 10, 15, 20 minutes is that test session, because what you want to see is how they apply said feedback. I want to see how coachable they actually are in practice. So you can be humble and just like not have the brain processing power or what have you to be able to then implement said coaching and feedback immediately, right? You may not like have the brain power to do that. And that may be an important thing for you in your facility. And so in short, we're going to do the session again, see how they took the coaching, and then basically close out that part of the interview process. Now you've got a better feel of how they coach, what their personality looks like when they're coaching. Are they able to take feedback? Are they humble enough to take feedback? Are they sharp enough to basically implement said feedback? All those different fun things, which Now I know that person, even if they're inexperienced, can come in and coach the shit out of what we do, right? Or at least has the raw materials to have the potential to be able to coach the shit out of what we do. And that's a pretty stinking cool thing. And the cool thing with this is, like, I didn't make them, train for 90 days with us and do some sort of crazy apprenticeship, but I did get an idea for how well they're going to be able to do the job. And you can apply this to any number. We do it all the time in the tech space of our business, right? So, we use all this crazy fun marketing automation software. So if we're hiring people, if we're hiring agents to help with that part of the business, guess what? We have sample test tasks that we want to see how the people think. Are they able to complete the project? And we have folks that, again, kind of on a similar vein, I don't care if they have 10 years of experience using said software, or if they're just a really good Googler and have a high degree of FitFo, right? Figure it the fuck out. It's one of our unofficial core values, is a high degree of FitFo on our team. So if they've got a degree of FitFo where, hey, I've never played on this software before, but I was able to figure it out and do the test task and complete it and give you notes and understand it, well, great. That person has a lot of potential, maybe more potential than someone who's been working on the software for 10 years and did the test task okay. Right? The same thing works for salespeople. So with salespeople, I'm going to have them sell me something. I may or may not give them script stuff. So it depends on kind of what your thought process is there. When we are hiring appointment setters, sometimes we do this, with onshore employees that are based in the States, right? Based locally. Sometimes we do it with our offshore folks. But basically, if we're hiring, say, an offshore appointment setter, I'm going to give them the script. I'm going to have them give the script to me, right? I'm going to, have them basically go through it, read it, try to sell me on whatever the thing is that we're potentially selling. I'm going to give them feedback. Right. And it's the same thing with salespeople as it is with trainers. If they seem like, oh yeah, like my shit doesn't stink, blah, 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 like I'm going to be a dick. I'm still going to give them some things to work on. And what I want to see is, do you improve the things that we talk about in that feedback process? Because now I get a feel for, number one, are you able to accept the coaching? Are you humble enough to accept feedback? And number two, are you able to actually act on it? Because if you're coachable, I don't necessarily care what your experience is. If your attitude's great, your personality's great, all those different fun things that are more difficult to coach, right? So if the stuff that's just like kind of God-given talent, if you will, if those things are good, and the things that maybe are less, less talent driven or more just developable, I can speak English, more developable. If there are traits that are sort of easier to develop with coaching and time, they are coachable on, right? And they take the feedback and improve on those things like on the spot. Well, gosh, we have a pretty good perspective hire. The same thing works if you're going to have somebody do a video editing project. We're hiring video editors. Guess what? We have them do a micro. So you're having somebody do some short form, video formatting. You want to be Grant Cardone or Hermosi or whoever the fuck. Well, if you're going to hire some video editing person online, you're going to Upwork or Fiverr, whatever it is. Well, then I'm going to have them do a, small 10-second thing and see what they do, right? In some cases, you might pay for that small test project, depending on what you're hiring for. In other cases, it may be a small enough thing and you get enough volume of people applying that, all right, you can let them do this on the house and then see how it shakes out. Now, would I be considerate of the person's time on the other side? Hell yes. Like, I'm not giving them a 10-minute video to adjust and do crazy fun editing, whatever else. I'm not trying to exploit free labor here, to be very clear. I'm taking a micro piece of a video that is very clearly like an incomplete video and seeing what they do with it, see if they have the basic skills, see if they can understand the language and get English and do good captions or whatever it is. And then guess what? I know whether or not that person can do the stinking job because I had them do it before I hired them. So hopefully these are some valuable tips. I absolutely love it. I cannot recommend it enough when it comes to hiring trainers and salespeople in particular. I think those are the most applicable things for gyms. I would consider finding creative ways on how you can implement this idea, this concept in any position that you're hiring people for as well. So love hugs. Hope that was helpful. See you in the next episode.